Hi, everybody, and welcome. My name is Brian Kotz. I am the President and Chief Innovations Officer here at Blaze Performance Solutions, and I'm excited today to bring you guys some really great content. But before we start, I would like to start by just talking very quickly a little bit about us and what we do and our 2020 vision. So here at Blaze, our focus is to bridge the gap between strategy and results. And we know that a lot of things are going on in the world right now that can make it difficult to achieve the results that we want. And so our vision is to add as much value as possible to the world so that we can be able to not only showcase obviously the content and the stuff that we love to do, but to be able to actually help make the world a better place and to change it. In fact, me and my business partners, we say all the time that our goal is to change the world. And right now there's a lot of needs that need to be met. And so we are excited and we're honored and privileged you guys joined us today to help us achieve our 2020 vision in today's content. So let's go ahead and let's get started. And today, the content is around winning back your day. So whenever it comes to winning back your day, what we're really wanting you to expect out of this is 3 topics. We're going to go over key 3 as we typically do. And the key 3 for today is number 1, manage your email. So obviously, we all get a ton of emails. We know that managing our emails can be tough. And so if you want to win back your day, you have to effectively manage your email. Number 2, manage your meetings. So while many of you may be working from home now, you're still probably going to have a ton of meetings. They're just going to look a little bit different. So we're going to talk about meetings, both live and virtual, because if you want to win back your day, you have to be able to also manage your meetings. And then number 3, if you're going to win back your day, you have to manage your life. There's a lot of other things going on, right? We have our normal life that has to be managed as well. And what we know is that us as human beings, we are whole people, meaning we have a work life, a personal life, and time for ourselves. So we need all of these things in order to be effective. So we're going to talk a little bit about managing your life outside of just your meetings and your emails today. So with that, let's just get started with managing your emails. And the point of managing your emails is to make sure that you don't get overwhelmed. And think about it. Have you ever just sat down and you opened up your computer and you turned it on and you open up Outlook or whatever email service you use, and the emails just start to flood in? And you're like, oh my gosh, you're starting your day off already overwhelmed. Or maybe you wake up in the morning, you look at your phone, and it says 110 emails. You go, oh my gosh, what in the world am I going to do? There's too many. What am I going to do? Well, we want to make sure that you're managing your emails effectively so that you don't get overwhelmed. And here's a stat that you might want to know. 50 times per day is the average time that employees check their emails every single day. Now think about it. You might be thinking to yourself, in fact, I was talking to a friend of mine about this, like 50, like that's a low ball number. He's like maybe 150. And maybe that's true. For you, it might be less. For you, it might be more. But think about the time that is taken just in checking emails on a daily basis. I mean, if you're working an 8-hour day, goodness gracious, you're checking it multiple times per hour. Per hour, you're checking it multiple times. And so how are you getting other work done if you're always just working your email? So let's go forward and let's talk about the keys of managing your email effectively. Number 1, we're going to talk about thriving instead of just surviving. And what we mean is this, is that we don't want you to have to feel like you're just getting by every day. We want you to feel successful, even in handling your emails. And one of the first big tips that I love to give people, schedule time for your email, don't live in it. Now, I've seen many reports from multiple different people over time that have been, I only check my email 2 or 3 times a day and I schedule it. And maybe that works for them. That's great. That's never frankly worked for me. For me, I schedule it more times than that. I typically check my email somewhere roughly between once or twice an hour, which puts me between 8 and 16, or let's just call it, less than 20 times a day. Now, the reason for that, the reason why I schedule it to check it is because I have the notifications turned off on my phone. I do this purposefully as well, because if I'm working on something, I do a lot of content design, as I'm sure many of you guys do. If I'm doing content design and I'm really in the zone, I don't want to be distracted. I don't want to lose my focus and my concentration on designing something that's very important because I got an email from Bed Bath & Beyond telling me that they're having a sale on soap, right? I don't want to interrupt my day because there's just another FYI email. Now, you might be thinking, well, Brian, what if it's a really important email that I have to handle right now in this moment? Well, depending on your job role, you may have that. In talking to people who are in IT support, right? They have help desk tickets that come through. They have to handle those immediately. So that is definitely going to be something different. You'll have to figure out a different way. So maybe you do have to be in your email constantly, right? But for many of us, we don't. Many of us, we feel like we do, but we don't actually have to. And what we lose in that is productivity. We lose focus. We lose the ability for us to maintain our concentration on a single important topic for more than 2 or 3 minutes, because if we're checking our emails 50 times a day, it's just constantly popping up in front of us. And every time we see it, something happens in our brain where we get distracted and say, oh, I better go check that. And then we lose our path on what we're working on. That's very important. And then we have to come back and figure it out later. And there's a lot of wasted time in that process. So, number 1, schedule your time for email. Don't live in it. Number 2, act immediately on the important. Don't procrastinate. Oh, man, I love this one. So, what we're talking about here is that whenever an email does come through that needs to be handled, we want you to go ahead and handle it right in that moment. You know, I know people, and I'm actually guilty. I have done this in the past. I admit it. Mark an email unread so I know to go back to it later. And by the way, I know a couple of you on there are probably chuckling to yourself. You're like, ha, he got me. I know, right? This is something that many of us do. But what happens is that then it starts to get basically buried underneath the mound or the mountain of other emails. And it's hard to take time to go back and do it. And so if there is something important, we want you to act on it immediately and then get it out of your inbox. Move it to a file folder, delete it, get it out of your inbox. The more you have in your inbox, the more likely you are to feel overwhelmed. The more overwhelmed you feel, the more stress adds up in your life. The more stressed that you are, the lower your productivity goes. Study after study after study will show that high stress tends to lower productivity. So if you want to help yourself in this manner, what you need to do is you need to act on the things that are really important immediately. Don't procrastinate on them. Now, if it's something that doesn't need to be handled immediately, what do we do then? Well, there's multiple things. Number 1 is you could leave it in your inbox and you can come back to it later during a set scheduled time where you go through to clear emails. And number 2, you could file it into a file folder where it needs to be. If it's just an FYI, you file it into a reading folder and you put it there for the time being. And then, of course, there is the third type of email that we have to talk about in this. And the third type is the unimportant email. The email that you just need to delete, get out of your inbox, be done with it. And it's funny because there's some people on the line right now who probably are saying to themselves, like, oh, I got no problem with that. I can delete an email immediately. That's me. I can delete an email. Does not matter to me at all. If it's unimportant, I can get rid of it fast. However, in the 15 plus years, 18, almost 20 years now, goodness gracious, of teaching time management, what I know is there is a ton of people, a vast, huge amount of people, they get fearful to delete emails. And I understand it. They've been burned before perhaps, and so they don't want that to happen again. I understand. We don't want to touch a hot stove twice. However, if it's unimportant, get it out of your inbox. If that means deleting it, delete it. If it means putting it into a folder, make a folder for things that you don't deem necessary that you just want to save. That's fine. But the more cluttered your inbox, the more cluttered it's going to feel whenever you go into it, and the stress is going to pile up. So the third key of managing your email, unsubscribe from the junk. Don't let it bury you. Now, for those of you who've seen me on a webinar before, perhaps the previous one, you know that every once in a while I might get emails from a couple of different places, or I might get text messages. This has been something that I've been focusing on very heavily for the past month, is getting rid of the things that I don't need. Unsubscribing from the junk, replying back stop to the text messages that keep coming back from Bowl and Branch. Man, those guys don't stop. Making sure that I get rid of those things, because what happens is that it will distract me from doing the things that I need to do in order to be as effective as I can. And so what's most important in this concept is to make sure that we are not allowing ourselves to get distracted by things that are unimportant, right? If it's a junk email, delete it, unsubscribe from it. If it's a junk text, get rid of it, unsubscribe from it, right? Reply back stop, and that typically ends it. But what you don't want to do is set yourself up for additional struggle, additional overwhelm because of things that just don't need to be there. Now, if you're saying to yourself, well, but what if I need it one day? Well, if you might need it one day, then you can set up a rule in your inbox to auto send it to a folder so it never hits your inbox. And then if one day you need whatever it might be, maybe you need an email from a vendor, who knows it might be, then you can always go back and get it. But the big point with thriving in your inbox versus just trying to survive it is about trying to limit the amount of items in the inbox whenever you go in, because your inbox for most people is their working screen, right? Whenever they're working, if they have a dual monitor system, they have their email pulled up on one, and then they're working on the other one. So it is a constant working screen. You do not want to have a working screen that is constantly distracting you from actually working. And so in order to do that, what we do is we limit it, and we make sure that we schedule our time for our emails. We don't live in it. We act on the important things immediately. We don't procrastinate on those. We move things that need to be moved as soon as they need to be, and we unsubscribe from the things that we don't need instead of letting it bury us. And if we can do that, then we can start to thrive in our emails instead of just surviving them. So with that, we're going to move forward into managing our meetings. And this is about not being overwhelmed as well, right? So we got to get rid of the overwhelm in the meetings because we know that they're definitely overwhelming. And how overwhelming are they? Well, actually, how overwhelming they are is that most people, whenever I talk to them, they typically find that their day, especially most leaders, that somewhere between 4 and 7 hours a day are spent in meetings. And think about that. When do you get your work done if between 4 and 7 hours of your day are spent in meetings? You do it before work and after work. That's what we find. And then you're just trying to find little bits of time wherever you can to get a little email sent here, something done here, or you're walking, you're late from meeting to meeting to meeting. Too many meetings is definitely going to be an issue. It's going to be a struggle, right? Ineffective meetings are going to be a struggle. And so if you're going to make sure that you're getting stuff done in your meetings and not wasting time, we want to talk about 3 keys to having an effective meeting. Now, these 3 keys, I'm going to tell you, they can be difficult. And I'm very open about this. Meeting culture is a real thing. Organizations have a meeting culture. Changing that culture can be, nearly impossible at times, it feels like. However, all it takes is one person trying to make a difference to be able to shift the way that meetings are ran in an organization. And I'm going to give you 3 key things that you can do today to help ensure that you are getting meetings that are more effective. So we start with this. Have an agenda. Now, it seems very obvious, right? Have an agenda, of course, right? Having an agenda seems pretty basic. But how many meetings do you attend that don't have an agenda? You show up to the meeting and you have no idea what's going on in that meeting. You just show up because, I was invited to the meeting, so I got to go, right? What we find is this. There's multiple issues that happen without having an agenda. Number one, people who do not need to be there could be there. And that can be a problem. That's a lot of wasted time. Another issue that we find is really related to something that I'm passionate about talking about, and that is introverts versus extroverts. So anyone who's familiar with the Myers-Briggs type indicator, or even just the phrase of introvert, extrovert, you'll know that introverts get their energy from time to themselves, right? It's not that they can't be loud and boisterous. They absolutely can. They can be people, if you will, just as much as an extrovert can. It's just that their energy is then, gained back or replenished through time by themselves, versus extroverts, they get their energy from other people. So the reason why introverts, extroverts are important in meetings is introverts typically, not always, but again, we're going off of generalizations. Introverts typically do not like to speak about things that they do not feel that they have taken the time to internalize and understand well enough to give their opinion. Now, this is important in meetings because if we do not send an agenda, we are basically bringing in the introverts of our organization into a room, expecting them to talk about something, and they don't feel comfortable enough to do so. So what we find organizationally is that we find introverts are in meetings, they're quiet, we think they're disengaged, they're not giving their ideas, we think, oh my goodness, they don't like this, oh my goodness, they're not being a team player here. But then a day later, 2 days later, 3 days later, that same person will come back up to the person running the meeting and say, hey, I've been thinking about what we were talking about in that meeting, and this is what I think is the way we got to go on that. The reason that happens is because they needed time to digest the material before they started giving opinions and thoughts, because they value the words that they say. Whereas extroverts like myself, I think while I talk. You literally could probably just put a prompt in one of the comments here and say, hey, Brian, talk about this, and I would just do it, right? That isn't the way everyone acts. And so we cannot operate meetings as though everyone operates the same way. So if you want to have more effective meetings and utilize the people within your organization, especially the introverts, who I would say have many amazing great ideas, if not more great ideas, we have to give them the time to come prepared to the meeting, know what's going on, give them an agenda, let them process what's going to happen so they can bring their best self to that meeting. Number 2, start on time. Again, seems really basic, right? Oh, have an effective meeting, start on time. How difficult is it to start meetings on time? It's very difficult because you're waiting for people to come in. You're waiting for someone to come from another building, perhaps, because they had back-to-back meetings. And what I hear a lot, especially whenever I was in corporate, was, oh, hey guys, sorry I'm late for this meeting. I had back-to-backs for the last 3 hours and I didn't even have time to go to the restroom. I'm like, oh my goodness, that sounds like a bad meeting culture, right? And it is the way it is sometimes. However, we want to make sure that we are valuing everyone's time. We're being respectful of their time and starting our meetings on time. And by the way, this also goes ending a meeting on time. Because time management isn't just for daily tasks. You can also manage the time of a meeting. You can assign roles in a meeting. You can assign a timekeeper to a meeting to ensure that everyone is sticking to a schedule, that you're staying on topic, right? But you have to start by getting everyone in, get it going, start on time. Now, the third piece that we talk about is that more can be less. And actually, it's funny. I always like telling people a little behind the scenes design. I was going to be, originally I had this in there as basically sometimes you need less, sometimes you need more. And so I'm going to kind of stick with that, but more can be less in this way. Sometimes you need more people in the room. And what I mean is you have to ensure that you have an inclusive group that really covers all of the dynamics that you need in order to make an effective decision. Some of the worst corporate blunders that I have ever seen, and I've put them into, I've built classes off of them. One of them that happened with H&M. I don't know if anyone knows who that is or what happened, but I built an entire class of inclusion basically based on one major mistake that they made. And here's what happened. They didn't have the right people in the room when they were making a decision. And they just rolled with it, and it became a very ineffective meeting because the decisions that they wound up making did a pretty bad thing for their corporate brand, frankly. Now, with this, you also do not want to do the opposite. Okay, while you want to have the right people in the room, so sometimes you might need more people in the room to take less time for a meeting because you have the right people in there. Sometimes you need less people in the room because you have too many people in there. I'll never forget whenever I was working with CSX, and one of the great stories that I heard, I actually checked it with him. He and I worked together quite a bit, but at that time, the chief financial officer, his name was Oscar Munoz. He's now currently the CEO of United Airlines. He was promoted into the chief operating officer position at CSX. So he went from CFO to COO. Whenever he went to that job, obviously very different tasks, different things going on, but he took the role and he started looking at his calendar and started seeing all these different meetings that he was getting. And his day was completely just spent already. Before he even set a meeting himself, he was already completely booked with meetings. And so he went basically down the line through every single meeting and started looking at, why am I in this one? He started calling people who had set up the meeting saying, hey, why am I in this meeting? Why am I supposed to be here? What's going on? And he wound up clearing out somewhere around 40% of his meetings and turned them into reports that could just be generated to give him the information he needed, because it is much easier for him to look at a report, either one page or one line that he needed, instead of getting 15 people together in a meeting, wasting thousands of dollars of productivity to do that. So take a look at the meetings that you have. Are they needed? Are they effective? Right? I see a meme going on right now all over the internet, and it's so funny that it basically came from a Twitter post, I think, that right now with what we're going through with COVID-19, we're about to see how many meetings really could have been emails, right? And I think that we've probably seen that a bit too. But things like this can get you to stop and think for a little bit. Why are we doing this? Why are we here? Are we just doing this meeting because, well, we just always had a Tuesday meeting? Is that what we do? Because that is not the best use of our time. If we are trying to improve our productivity, whether we are in an office space or working from home now, we have to make sure that we are paying attention. Are we supposed to be in a meeting? Do we need to be there? Does everyone that's invited to it need to be there? Do we need 5 representatives from the same department? Be thoughtful and intentional with putting people into the meeting. And as we look at really managing our meetings, it comes down to that intentionality. Be intentional with the purpose of the meeting, with your agenda. Be intentional with starting and ending on time and sticking on topic. Be intentional with who you invite and who you don't invite to ensure that you get the best results. So as we find with many things, whether it be leadership, whether it be productivity, so many things that we train on, one of the common themes that we see that I think is so important for people to be able to grasp on is if you take a little bit of time and you are thoughtful and intentional with how you approach it, we find that your results are better. And again, I'm not trying to make it too simplistic, but I recommend that everyone, whether we're talking about email, taking the time, do I manage my email effectively, yes or no? If the answer is no, how can you be better? And then start implementing things to change it. Same thing with meetings. Are our meetings effective? I've never gone into an organization yet, by the way, that said, oh yeah, all our meetings are completely effective. I've never seen it. And so if you fall into the category that says, no, our meetings are not as effective as they could be, I want you to stop, think about what does it need in order to be more effective, and then start implementing those things into your meetings. While you cannot change everyone else's meetings, you can surely change your own. And so make sure that you are setting an example for how a meeting should be ran effectively. The third key that we're going to talk about today is manage your time. And when manage your time, while this isn't a full-time management course, this is really an overview of our productivity offerings, right? We want to make sure that you're not just getting stuff done. In fact, I never tell people, get more done. That's not what I do, right? That's not what I preach or I practice. I don't say do more stuff. What I do say is get the right stuff done, because that is where you get more productivity. Get the right stuff done. Now, I made a mistake with the attribution to this, by the way, and I want to make sure that I give it to the right person, but this is actually a statistic from Brian Tracy from a book called Eat That Frog. I don't know if you've read it. It's an excellent book, great book. But 2 hours per day, this is a magic number whenever it comes to time management. 2 hours a day is the average amount of time that people save, according to this book and his research, by spending 15 minutes per day in daily planning. Now think about that. That's an amazing return on your time investment, right? You put in 15 minutes, you get back 2 hours. That is amazing. But you have to do it effectively. So we're going to talk about very quickly a couple of things. And one is the Eisenhower time matrix, right? Or the Eisenhower decision matrix. So I've spoken about this in previous sessions, so I'm not going to go fully in depth in it. But I do want to highlight this quickly and say, look, there's 4 quadrants here. It's based on a dual axis. One axis up and down is importance, and then side to side is going to be on urgency, right? So quadrant 1 would be high importance, high urgency. Quadrant 3, low importance, but high urgency. Quadrant 4 would be low importance, low urgency. And then quadrant 2 is low urgency, but high importance. Whenever it comes to managing your life, one of the biggest things you have to have is you have to know where do things fall in its level of importance and urgency. And so to manage your time more effectively, we literally, and I spoke about this in my last session, by the way, pause, prioritize, and pursue. I'll briefly talk about that, but pause is where you take time, you stop, and you think. Literally, take a few deep breaths. Start being more proactive in your thinking. Don't just be reactive in the moment. And then prioritize is write everything down. This is how you use prioritize. Whenever you write everything down, you assign each thing to a quadrant. You say, is this important? Yes or no? And then, is this urgent? Meaning, does it need to be done right now? Yes or no? If it is important and urgent, it goes in quadrant 1. If you take all of the things that you wrote down that you need to do and you put them into this matrix, it will then show you the things that you need to work on right now. Meaning, the highest importance, highest urgent item must be completed right now. You got to get it done. And the hope is that you don't live your life entirely out of that urgent mentality, but sometimes you have to get things done now. And so you get those done. And then the next thing you work on then is you take the time, you make the time for quadrant 2, which are the things that are important but not urgent, meaning you can give your best time, your best thought, your unstressed time, we'll call it, to focusing on the important things, whether that be creating a strategy for how you're going to build your team or cross-train, putting together action plans for what happens if everyone has to work from home. That we wish we all would have done that about, a year ago, right? And so the Q2 time is really where you can have this amazing return on your time investment, because you put time in there and you get way more time back. And that's where we want to focus that time. Now, I mentioned again this pause, prioritize, and pursue model that I spoke about in my last webinar last week. And I'm going to bring that up again in a moment, but I want to do it within the confines of time management and planning. Now, whenever someone hears time management, they immediately think planning. They think of planner, right? And you can use a paper planner, you can use a digital planner, that's up to you. But I want to talk about what I believe is the great fallacy of time management. Now, I've never even told my business partners this, by the way. We didn't have time to go over everything I was going to talk about today, so I'm going to surprise them with this. I believe that there has been a great injustice done to everyone when talking about time management over the last however many years it's been taught. I think we've left something out, okay? And I'm going to give you guys what has been left out today, and I'm going to put it into a perspective that I hope that you see is a little bit different than you've seen in the past. I'm going to start with what we all know and the things that are true, and I'm going to have to add in the layer on top of it. Number one, weekly planning. Weekly planning is extremely important. You take time once a week to sit down, be purposeful, be intentional, thoughtful about your week. Now, the typical strategy for a weekly plan would be this. Get by yourself, take 15, 20, 30 minutes if possible. And by the way, you might be saying, Brian, I can't take 30 minutes to myself. Hey, I understand. Again, I have 3 kids, 4 years old and under. Alone time is precious. It's more precious than diamonds. But for me, on a Sunday night around 9 p.m., I'm by myself. And I can sit there and I can do my weekly plan, which consists very easily of this. I look at my week ahead and I identify what are all the big things that need to be done, right? Do I have any important meetings that I need to make sure that I highlight, that I'm prepared for? Do I have any deliverables that need to be done? I look at those things to make sure that I have all of them on there, right? I'll go through my task list and I'll look, okay, are there any big things that aren't on my schedule yet? And I put them where they need to go. Basically what I do is I start the week by filling time with the most important things. Now, I do not block my day from 8 to 5. I leave time in there. In fact, one of the things I do in my life is I have something called sacred time. Every single day, I have 1 hour blocked of sacred time. And sacred time is for me. And you can use it however you wish. For me, I use it very specifically. Is I make sure that I eat lunch every day. Lunch matters to me. And maybe you think that's silly, and maybe it is silly. But I know that my afternoons are more productive when I eat lunch. And so I take time to eat lunch, and I do a little bit of reading. I typically read during my lunchtime. That's what I like to do. And that is time for me every day where I know I can renew in the middle of the day. I have a stressful, busy morning, and then I can take time to renew, and then I can attack the afternoon to be as successful as I can and productive as I can in the afternoon, right? The next step of weekly plan, after you look at all the important things, you say, okay, what other things need to be done? Maybe they're a lower importance, but what needs to be done? Do I have any meetings that I need to make sure I'm prepared for with content or with ideas? Do I need to be purposeful, thoughtful around that? Do I need to block any other time off? Excuse me. And then finally, the last thing that I do is that I review my entire week and I say, if I did all these things, would I have felt or would I feel successful at the end of the week, or am I missing something? And by the way, I do this for my personal life as well. I look at my personal life and I say, you know, I need to make sure that I have date night scheduled. I need to make sure that I have that. Did I set that time aside? Do I have it there? Do I need to move anything? And I'm intentional from a macro perspective. I look at the weekly plan to help ensure that I am set up for success for the week. Now, the secondary piece is daily plan. Now, the daily plan, it's very much so like a weekly plan. It's just in a more narrow focus, and the focus of one day. So typically, I do my daily plan, and I've talked about this for a long time. You can do it in the morning or in the evening. It's up to you. The evening before, right? So it's very plausible that for today, being Tuesday, this evening, I could plan for Wednesday. Or I could wake up in the morning and do that. It's up to you. It's your life, your schedule. You figure it out. For me, morning planning does not work. Whenever I wake up, I have, within 30 minutes, I have screaming children. Just the way that it is, it's not easy for me to do a daily plan in the morning, so I do it in the evening. And so I take the time and I review the day. I look through the entire day, every single item that's on my calendar. And I say, okay, do I have everything I need for each of these, or do I need to start blocking time this morning to finish some work with it? It's a very important piece to make sure that you are prepared for the day. There are a few things I personally find more stressful than looking at my calendar, seeing I have a meeting in 5 minutes and saying, oh my gosh, I didn't prepare for this. Oh no. That totally just stresses me out. And so I make sure that I take the time either the night before or the morning of to look through my day. What all do I have? Make sure that I'm prepared for it. Then I start blocking other time. Okay, other things that have come up, things on my task list, I can put those things in there. I start organizing all the things that need to be done for that day and set myself up for success. And then I do this, which is an interesting kind of side note. Same thing in a weekly plan. I ask myself the question, if I do all these things today, will I feel successful? Will I feel like the day was a success? And if I say yes, that means I'm doing the right stuff. And if I say no, then that means I need to reevaluate the things that are on my calendar to make sure that I'm doing the things that are most important. Now, at the beginning of this slide, I made a mention to, I felt like that there was a great fallacy, right? And the great fallacy for me has been, I felt like that so many people just talk about weekly and daily planning. And there is a huge, huge thing missing. And it's something that I implemented without really being intentional with it being a time management concept. But I spoke about it last week, and I want to put it into perspective for you today, and that is pause, prioritize, and pursue. This is the act of breaking up your day to make sure that you are on track. You know, I talk to a lot of organizations, and I've been a part of several organizations as well that have done things like engagement surveys. And I have no issue with engagement surveys. I'm not going to say one way or the other, right? That's just for you. But here's one issue that I have seen with engagement surveys, is that it's a once-a-year assessment. Once a year, we stop, we look, and we say, okay, here's what our employees need, and then we hope we're doing the right things, and then a year later, we measure it, and we hope that over the last year, we did good, right? The issue is it's a lot of time where we could have course-corrected if we would have known something was different, and we don't then have the ability to course-correct. The same thing goes with, and we do this with performance management for some organizations. It's a once-a-year event. No time to course-correct throughout the year. What I see with time management is that we need a much more narrow focus of course correction, not on a monthly schedule, not on a weekly schedule, it has to come down to the daily. And daily, we need to do course correction multiple times, perhaps throughout the day, to make sure that we are staying on track with what we need to do. So this is the methodology that I use for this, is pause, prioritize, and pursue. Multiple times a day, I stop, take a few deep breaths, get myself kind of centered, be thoughtful and purposeful, intentional, get blood flowing to my brain, oxygen flowing to my brain so I can be more intentional with my thought. And then I look, okay, it's been 3 hours. Here's everything I got done. Great. What do I have to do the rest of the day? And I prioritize all of those things. Instead of getting caught up in this, vicious cycle of just getting stuff done, this is your chance to stop and be purposeful and intentional with your time. For you to reprioritize throughout the day, multiple times a day, and say, this is where I need to go over the next couple hours. And obviously, we focus heavily at Blaze on micro-learning, and micro goals is a part of that. This is basically an intentional micro goal, saying for the next 2 hours, I'm going to work on this because this is what's most important. And then in 2 hours, you reassess, you pause, prioritize, and then you pursue again. You start working towards that. All right, so this methodology is multiple times a day. You stop, take a few deep breaths, prioritize all the things that are going on, write down all the things that need to be done, prioritize them, and then pursue, which is start working on the most important thing. If you can do this, if you can add this layer in, it will change the way that you do time management because it allows you something that, frankly, most people need in their life. They need to stop. They need to prioritize. They need to reconfigure their day on the fly at times. It's important for us not to say, oh, well, I did a daily plan, I did a weekly plan, but man, time management doesn't work for me. It's not just planning your work and working your plan. It's a consistent thing where you're constantly planning, you're constantly being intentional, constantly focusing on the right things throughout the day if you want to feel the success that you really need to have out of your day. And so with that, I want to make sure that you are taking the time to plan. Yes, you need to do a weekly plan. Yes, you need to do a daily plan, but also make sure that you are course correcting throughout the day. And I think a great way of doing that is through pausing, prioritizing, and pursuing your most important goals. So with that today, guys, here's what we have done. We have talked about 3 keys to winning back your day. The first was managing your email. All right. And remember, make sure you schedule time for your email. Don't live in it. Make sure you act immediately on the important. Don't just procrastinate about it. And make sure you unsubscribe from the junk and don't let it bury you. We also talked about managing your meetings. We talked about having an agenda, making sure you start on time. And it's sometimes more people can cause you to have less time in the meeting because you're getting the right results at the right time. And then, of course, we talked about making sure that you have time to plan via your weekly plan, your daily plan, and by pausing, prioritizing, and pursuing the most important things. And guys, with that, that is an overview of some of our productivity offerings. And we hope that you gain value from that and that you take the time to win back your day, manage your meetings, manage your email, and manage your life and your time as effectively as you can. And if you want to do that, you have to be intentional. You have to be purposeful, and you have to actually do it. One of my favorite things to say whenever I'm facilitating is, just hearing the words coming from my mouth doesn't change you. You change you. You have to act to see a change. If you want to see a change, you have to make a change. And if today you've learned something or you've heard something like, man, I really do need to focus on this, I hope that you take the time to do that, because right now is a pivotal time, I think, in the world in many ways, and we need to make sure that we are focused on being our best selves, on being productive, on not getting, sucked into the overwhelm, because it is very easy to do so. And guys, that's how we bridge the gap between strategy and results when it comes to winning back your day. If you have any questions for us, please feel free, email us at info@bps3keys.com. Again, I'm Brian Cox, and it has been a pleasure and an honor to be with you guys today. We have another wonderful, wonderful webinar coming up on Thursday, and that will be, I believe, with both Kent Vaughn, our CEO, as well as our Chief Operating Officer, David Williams. And they will be talking about execution on Thursday of this week. So make sure that you sign up for that, register for that. It's going to be an amazing session. I'm looking forward to it. I know you guys will as well. And I encourage you to go out there right now and win back your day.